In 1977, when Joan Kelly proposed that there was no Renaissance for women, at least not during the Renaissance, she countered the accepted view of gender equality proposed by Jacob Burckhardt, who had stated in 1860 that women in the Renaissance, and I quote, stood on a footing of perfect equality with men, end quote. Overwhelmingly right she was. But today I'd like to highlight a certain degree of progress enjoyed by female characters in early modern Italian comedy, which can be linked, I argue, to one socio-political issue of the age, the Turkish threat. The period of greatest conflict between Christians and Turks occurs during the long 16th century. Incidentally, these years converge with Italian comedy's golden age. Initially bound tightly to classical tradition, first-wave Italian comedies merely provided a play's date or location by citing a previous Turkish raid. As conflict on the Mediterranean Sea grows, however, so too does the Turkish element in comedy, eventually becoming central to the play. Corsair attacks years prior set the scene for fifth act recognition scenes and make it seem as if every early modern Italian comedy, or every early modern Italian family, lost an infant due to the cruel and relentless corsairs patrolling the Italian coast. Turkish incursions complicate lovers' intricate tricks and threaten tragic endings. Turkish language play dupes gullible monolingual characters. Playwrights saw no better way to represent deception than by dressing characters as Turks, widely associated with untrustworthiness and betrayal. In drama and indeed in all forms of literature, Turks are depicted as libidinous and deceptive, murderous and proselytizing fanatics who would kidnap Italians and torture their captives until they converted to Islam. The violent themes of kidnapping, privateering, slavery, and conversion occur with such a frequency that I would propose they make up an entire subgenre of comedy, which I will refer to as comedy of conflict forthwith. Some of these comedies of conflict include Florentine Giovan Maria Cecchi's La Stiava from 1550, a sort of soft entry into the genre, the Neapolitan Giambattista della Porta's La Turca and La Sorella from 1572 and 1601 respectively, Luigi Grotto or Il Cieco d'Adria's Emilia from 1572, and Giovan Battista Andreini's Turkish trilogy, La Turca, Lo Schiavetto, and La Sultana, written between 1611 and 1621. It is my contention that comedy of conflict played a significant role in the rise of the female in Italian drama, with Turkish topoi allowing for the development of female characters as agency. Female characters' position as slaves allowed them not only social but geographic mobility. No longer were women confined to windows, doorways, and walks to church. They were given the liberty, ironically through servitude, to travel the vast Mediterranean in an early modern iteration of the Grand Tour. Themes of kidnapping and servitude contributed to the unmaking of the female, thus reconstructing a notion of femininity in which a woman could be a protagonist. Indeed, as we'll see, she could be a well-traveled, multilingual, and independent protagonist. But this had not always been the case. Along with the classical unities, the notion of femininity that survived Roman comedy and reappeared in early 16th century erotic comedy, those women who were at the top of the social hierarchy were the ones with the least dramatic importance allotted to them. The younger and more virginal they were, the more dramatically disadvantaged they tended to be. Conversely, servant women, procuresses, and prostitutes were far more likely to be seen on stage or to contribute to the dialogue. They, unlike higher class and younger characters, were at least afforded the opportunity to move freely throughout the streets and were not confined to the window, doorway, or church. The classical unities that were so carefully adhered to acted as hindrances and kept female characters from employing any potential agency. Since neither the place of women, the home, or the time of women, daylight hours, converged with the theatrical conventions of time and place, they were thus deprived of much of the stage time. Even the innamorata, the young, ostensibly virginal female character with the very least dramatic agency, a woman rarely appreciated as more than an object of sexual desire and typically relegated to her fixed place at the window or doorway, also gains a certain degree of control in comedy of conflict as the century wanes. In Della Porta's La Sorella, the innamorata Clelia was taken captive from Nola, a small town near Naples. She was then sold in Constantinople, where she worked together with her mother for nearly a decade before she was separated from her and purchased by a Sanjak Bey. Eventually, Clelia made her way to Venice, where she meets Attilio, the innamorato, and fell in love. Cledia's imposture and duplicity is a common thread throughout La Sorella, and she plays an active part in the trick, a common aspect present in many early modern comedies. Typically, there's a trickster figure who helps the lovers enact the trick. The aforementioned plan often involves a way in which a young male character can gain access to the female object of his interest. In the case of La Sorella, the trick is put into action even before the play begins. The audience is immediately aware that the young man Attilio has brought home a young woman he had met in Venice and is passing her off as his long-lost sister, so that he may live together with his beloved. The tricked individual is the father Pardo, who has been led to believe that Attilio's lover Clelia is Attilio's sister, that is Pardo's daughter, and that the wife and mother Costanza is dead. He is thus allowing the two lovers and siblings to commingle under his own roof. In the typical trick, the young woman plays no part other than serving as the prize at the conclusion of a successful trick. Indeed, it is not uncommon for the woman to be the victim of a trick. In La Sorella, however, Clelia is not merely a prize to be won, she is an important participant in the intrigue, at times actively and independently deceiving the victim, Pardo, without the help of the trick's mastermind. As soon as she begins to lose her footing in the argument, Clelia feigns ignorance by pretending not to understand Italian, even though it has been made abundantly clear that she, who has lived and worked all over the Mediterranean, has a firm grasp on the language. Clelia thus supersedes the trickster figure as the trick's mastermind. In her masquerade as trickster, Clelia even engages in a privileged audience contact through her use of the aside, a speech vehicle typically associated with this sort of character, as it allows the character to withhold information from other characters. The increased dramatic importance of female roles in the late 16th century, of course, converged with the emergence of the actress. Chief among their skills were their linguistic abilities, and it is often noted how they deftly switch from one language to another. Such a storyline is indeed common in the many scenari of the Commedia dell'arte, particularly from the first and second waves of the Commedia tradition. By the time that Giovan Battista Andreini is performing and publishing La Sultana in the 1620s, however, the female character can no longer be characterized as a mere counterpart to the male traveler. It is Sultana who is the unaccompanied traveler, Sultana who envisages the trick, and Sultana who moves the action of the plot. She's not following the male traveler to Italy. She's hunting, indeed stalking her prey from one land to another. It is in Andreini's La Sultana that a female protagonist reaches her highest degree of visibility and audibility. Sultana is a multilingual, well-traveled young woman who plays the manifold role of navigator and single mother protector over her infant child during their long and arduous journey from Constantinople to Ragusa to Naples. She's also an innamorata. She allows herself to be powerful and intelligent. Though menacing, she appears infinitely more virtuous than her former lover Lelio, who impregnated, robbed, abandoned, and humiliated her, and subsequently falls into every one of her tricks. Andreini's association of multilingualism with his female protagonist is a clear nod to the successful career of his mother Isabella, whose talent and fame he credited for his professional success. Sultana's grasp of the Italian language is so advanced that she is able to speak a perfectly fluent Tuscan for the majority of the play, and she's also able to imitate the broken Italian register of a Turkish slave when it benefits her purpose, utilizing unconjugated verbs and simplifying her speech. The multilingualism of female characters is apparent in the earlier Turkish comedies of Giovan Maria Cecchi and Luigi Grotto as well. The cunning Clelia from La Sorella, as noted before, grew up in Constantinople but speaks perfect Italian, though her exquisite grammar does not stop her from citing her foreignness, in order to conveniently excise herself from an uncomfortable situation. In Grotto's Emilia as well, the slave dealer speaks of the slave Flavia's linguistic prowess. While the language skills of female characters are often lauded within the script, the languages acquired by traveling men are never outwardly cited. Unlike women, who are constantly switching languages, men apparently did not speak languages other than their own, as the male trickster clearly demonstrates in La Sorella through a comic and unintelligible rant in Turkish. The trickster himself lacks the knowledge of a foreign language to successfully trick his victims, but the multilingual female repeatedly demonstrates this ability. It would seem that foreign language learning had become a uniquely feminine ability, and that Alberti's view that women are soft, slow, and not meant to engage in important duties has begun to lose its footing. Running concurrently through theater's golden age was the woman question, an early modern continuation of the late medieval querelle de femme. Sarah Gwyneth Ross has shown that at least by the 17th century, if not before, the learned woman was no longer a startling figure in society. She tracks the evolution of the female intellectual from her emergence in the 15th century, when forward-thinking fathers allowed their daughters an education equal to that of their sons. These early women humanists never found a comfortable place in society in the 15th century, but in time, the father or father patron became less crucial as a means to secure legitimacy. The stigma of the intellectual woman was lost, and there was a strong tradition of Italian female intellectuals. The multilingualism increasingly associated with female characters in Italian theater would certainly support this argument. La sorellas Clelia, Emilia's Emilia, Los Schiavetto's Florinda, and certainly La Sultana's Sultana all speak a myriad of different languages. At times, their intellect is simply highlighted as an attribute, but in other cases, particularly in the cases of Clelia and Sultana that I mentioned, they draw on their linguistic abilities and convert such privileged knowledge into power over their male counterparts. From the outset, Sultana makes it clear that hers is a mission of revenge. She does not appear particularly bent on reuniting with her former lover. Sultana seems far more interested in finding her former lover for the express purposes of killing him. Her greatest display of feminine strength comes in the final act. She has drugged Lelio and given him just enough poison to keep him alive, as she wishes for him to be coherent in the moment in which she takes his life. She is strong and determined, poised above Lelio in his drug-induced stupor, and she holds her knife firmly above his chest as she prepares to take his life. She yells out a proto-feminist call to arms. In early written theater, the odds were stacked against female characters, particularly those of a certain age and social status. In a theatrical tradition that so closely adhered to the classical norms, factors such as the unities of time and place naturally contributed to a low level of visibility and limited audibility, aided considerably by the contemporary view of women as soft, slow, and dangerously sexual. As Italian theater progresses, however, it moves farther away from a strong adherence to its classical roots. The Turkish threat being of great concern, themes such as abduction, enslavement, and servitude found a regular place in comedy. Initially used to explain the absence of a female character, these themes eventually contributed to the rise in agency of female characters. These women, wives, mothers, innamorate, those typically least privileged on the hierarchy of dramatic importance, returned. During their absence, they had changed, gaining attributes traditionally associated with a masculine identity. These female characters could and did travel far beyond the home, the doorstep, or the local parish. In their travels, they acquired languages, allowing them the opportunity to participate in the trick. The result is a strong, intelligent, powerful female character, entirely different from the one traditionally presented under a century prior.